You can't keep me cooped up in here, okay? I am a peacock. You gotta let me fly.
Hello there, and welcome to the Poppycock Podcast, where I'm not an expert and the topics don't matter. Today, we're going to hit a few topics. First off the bat, some more information on Zack Snyder's Sndydercut. Now, as you probably know, Zack Snyder's vision for what Justice League would have been, whether better or worse, was never fully realized, and he now has a chance to release it in the year 2021 for HBO Max as what will most likely be a limited series with chapters split up within it. Otherwise, you're looking at like a 4-hour plus Justice League movie, which I don't imagine too many people are going to have the patience to sit through that. People are still kind of complaining about the Irishman, and, well, admittedly, if Robert De Niro was dressed as Batman, I would have had more reason to watch that, because that sounds like a nightmare. But new information about the project has come to light. Recently, a Warner Brothers executive was on another podcast. He should have been on this one, but, I'll let it slide this time. And he was quoted in saying that he wished that the cost of completion for the Snyder Cut was indeed $30 million, which is what was kind of being tossed around at the time as being the general consensus of like how much it'll cost to take the rough cut of the Snyder Cut to a finalized version that HBO Max can then, finish out and release. It looks like more than likely Warner Brothers, AT&T, HBO Max, these are all entities that are entwined, but they all have their own cash reserves, their own cash flow, and it's looking more and more like it's going to be a cost that's split up between those organizations that all themselves or operate somehow within one another. But it is interesting to see that despite it being, pretty well done, for most of the scenes being shot, most of the action scenes being done, the CGI clearly needs to be touched up. There's going to be extra scenes most likely they need to film. There's been a lot of reports about actors like Ben Affleck, Jesse Eisenberg, Joe Manganiello, all these other people being told, hey, we're going to need you to potentially come back and record some new lines, maybe even do a couple more scenes, which I think would be interesting because we saw with the theatrical cut how obvious it can be when an actor is not in as good a shape as they were in other scenes, that huge shift whenever an actor walks out and suddenly they transition from one scene to the next and they don't look as clean cut, they don't look as buff. There's discrepancies with hair, but mostly it was obvious that, with Ben Affleck, his jawbones weren't chiseled and dangerous anymore and he was a little more puffy. That being said, he's probably in better shape than most human beings on the planet, but it'll be interesting to see if, an actor like Ben Affleck, who stepped away from the role as far as, the public is aware of, with Warner Brothers moving forward with the Batman starring Robert Pattinson, it makes you wonder if how much he's going to want to go to the gym again in order to just shoot a few extra scenes, or if they'll just say, get to this level of fitness and we can shoot around this and we can, in hindsight, we can alter where the camera's coming from. We can kind of play it up and make it look nice and pretty. That being said, it does sort of springboard into the next topic. And for me, I feel like this is way more of a rumor that's made up just because people want it to be true. I don't personally believe it to be true, but I would love for it to be. There's a rumor, though, that Zack Snyder and Ben Affleck are working together to make a limited mini-series set about Batman, springboarding off of the Snyder Cut of the Justice League. It'll be a continuation of that character, and his main foil throughout this series would be Joe Manganiello's Deathstroke, Slade Wilson. Now, obviously, this would be great news for anyone who's a fan of, Ben Affleck in the role. I think he did a great job with what he was given. I think he looked the part. I think he was one of the best Bruce Waynes, if not the best Bruce Wayne we've ever had. And he's up there as far as Batman. And it's not, I know the whole Save Martha, him using guns, all controversial. People fall on either sides of those camps. But you can't deny that the guy was an acting powerhouse, and he was acting the hell out of the role. And he looked the role. He looked like a comic book character that walked into 3 dimensions. It was fantastic. So to get more of that would be great. And with it being an HBO Max series, you could say, this is my Batman. I choose this. Or if you want to watch Robert Pattinson, you can say, that's my Batman. I choose this. Just like in the comic books, where they can have a couple different runs of superheroes that are not always tied together. Sometimes you have semi-consistent versions of a character that you see and you might have it where like, oh, well, these publications come in at the same time, but this actually takes place before this other one, so they exist within the same universe. You're reading them at the same time, but they're happening in a different order. Never really liked that, but it is what it is. But more often than not, you get scenarios where an artist or a guy with an idea says, I want to do this with a character, and they go in one direction, and someone says, I want to do this, and they're like, cool, your two characters are not the same version of this superhero. Go with it in this direction. They still usually have oversight, but they're allowed to differentiate from one another. Yes, I would love to see this happen, but doesn't it sound a little bit like fan fiction? Oh, Zack Snyder will stand to produce. A believable truth, but I think with the win of the Snyder Cut, people are just sort of riding that. Zack Snyder's back and he's in power, and him and HBO Max are going to take the DC universe by storm, and wah, which would be nifty. I'd love to see his versions of things. I've said it since pretty much the kerfuffle of the original theatrical release that if the man isn't allowed to finish his movie, they should just give him a graphic novel where he gets to say, this is what I wanted to do. And, that would have been a huge boon for those mega fans who are probably already comic book diehards. I think that would have been great. And now that he has a chance to finish it fully, that's even better. I think that's going to be awesome. I also wouldn't put it past him to do what the director of Logan did, where he puts out a black and white edit of it, because Zack Snyder loves his black and white photos, and I can't blame him. It's a cool look, so I wouldn't be shocked if there's two versions of the Snyder Cut, one that's full color or as full color as Zack Snyder so chooses, and then one that's black and white, similar to Logan and then Logan Noir, which is pretty nifty. But I do still think that it's basically just fan fiction, saying that Zack Snyder is going to produce, Ben Affleck, who's a great writer, great director, he's going to go in, he's going to write and direct the roles, and he's going to handle all this, and he's going to hop back into the character because he's a big Batman fan himself, and he's going to hop in there, maybe even get, his friend Kevin Smith involved, who is a diehard comic fan. He writes comics, and he's an all-around really incredible guy. That's a dream come true. And I'm hesitant to believe it because, the information is coming from places that aren't reputable. I mean, it's the internet, so at any given time, anyone could get information and be like, I don't know how to prove this. I'm just going to put it on the internet and maybe get a few free internet points. But at the same time, just about every day, someone's making up some ridiculous, mostly unbelievable claim about a movie or franchise or actor and seeing how many people will bite in order to give them their 15 minutes of internet fame. So you really have to sort of weigh those two options. And that's a tricky balance to make. However, with recent information that Geoff Johns may have been torpedoing Ben Affleck's Batman, and it wasn't really, I couldn't get the script right, which was sort of the official narrative, and a lot of fatigue from Batman vs. Superman really being raked over the fires, and then the mess of making Justice League, and then that sort of muddled reception, dude was sort of emotionally checked out, which is a shame, because if you check out Zack Snyder's Vero social media account, you can see behind the scenes videos from Batman vs. Superman where Ben Affleck, his eyes are so full of light and he's making jokes on set and he's buff and he's doing push-ups in the mech Batman armor suit, and he looks like he's having a great time. He looks like any guy who wakes up and gets to put on a Batman costume and get paid for it. You're excited. I mean, if I was forced to work out as extensively as Ben probably did, I would be a little bit less happy. I would probably just wake up and have that paycheck framed on the doorway so I could look at it and be like, it's all worth it, Plus, someday kids are going to pretend to be me, which would be pretty nifty as well. But rumor has it that Geoff Johns, who was briefly the head of DC's film, and who has been pretty notorious for making waves and making enemies along the way in the comic book and in the film industry, as far as he's been involved, he actually had his own production studio getting set up, and they were going to make movies for Warner Brothers. And so if you have Zack Snyder and you have his continuity going forward, they might just keep doing things through Zack Snyder stuff, and there's no need to use Geoff Johns' production studio, or at the very least, he might be vying for second place scraps, or the characters that Zack doesn't want to adapt. And I can completely see Zack Snyder coming at it from the point of view of a consumer who is also a filmmaker who's adapting his version of these characters versus a guy who's been writing comic books, who's trying to then translate that into movies. They're going to have different opinions. So I could see it that, with 3+ years now of avid support from fans online saying Ben Affleck was great, saying he was good for the role, saying his Batman was iconic and awesome. And, I'm one to agree with most of those claims myself. And then to also see that Geoff Johns has been pushed down on the pecking order of the DC cinematic universe, to see the huge upswing and availability that he could be more artistic, that he could pursue different things on HBO Max, and maybe even they could sort of incentivize it of saying, hey, you come do this series for us and we will greenlight more of your projects that maybe they couldn't get a theatrical release, but we'll do more of your like movies and your TV shows where you're behind the scenes or you're in front of the camera, whichever you prefer. Some passion projects, we'll put those up on HBO Max. Gives HBO Max more ammunition to say this is why you should subscribe to us over Netflix or Disney Plus or Hulu. I don't know who's paying for Hulu. That's a crap service. Whatever, it's one more notch to put in their belt to say this is why we matter and why you should be paying attention to us as a brand. And it gives Ben Affleck a chance to be creative again, because basically from the moment he got cast as Batman, every movie, every television show, every interview, everything just turned into, so what's it like being Batman? What's your Batman gonna look like? What's the Batsuit gonna look like? What's the Batmobile gonna look like? Are you excited to be Batman? And the dude's promoting passion projects and things he's been trying to get off the ground for a while. So between that, marital issues, alcoholism, rehab, the mess that was everything that happened with the fan reception and the handling of Justice League, I could see him now, in retrospect, seeing everything evolve and grow and seeing the fan support, feeling comfortable stepping back into that position. And again, this is a personal take. This is not God-sended proof. This is not the opinion that you have to share. But I do personally question whether or not Robert Pattinson's Batman will be good. Originally, I thought that his comments about being in shape and being buff were a little bit flippant. I thought he was kind of being dickish, and he didn't sound like he was taking the role seriously. And if the character doesn't need to look buff anymore, if they've already shot all the things and it's pretty much just like dialogue in his suit, like walking around as Bruce Wayne, maybe he doesn't need to be buff. Kevin Conroy is not a big guy, but he conveys a great Batman voice. And looking back at Michael Keaton, not a buff dude, one of the greatest Batman actors of all time, in one of the greatest Batman movies of all time. The second Batman movie he's in is a little creepier, in my opinion. It's just gross. Penguin freaked me out as a kid. He's a very messy fella. However, Catwoman definitely laid some foundations for some kinks for me as I turned into an adult. So, two sides of the same coin. Two-faced joke. Anyway, so that sort of gave me worry. But then I saw him in the trailer for Tenet, and I realized, you know what? If you're acting really well, I can look past you not looking as long as you look like you're healthy. The guy is a good actor. I'll probably be fine with it. But the fact that his Batsuit, again, the Marvel movie costumes, if you see them on a mannequin, they look really dumb. You see them on film, they look great. Part of that is the way they shoot it, and some things just look better in motion. And then also they go in and they digitally enhance, alter, or completely digitally erase because they have Disney money and they could pretty much buy their own planet at this point. So there's a good chance that the Batsuit will look cooler or look better. Right now it looks kind of clunky and uncomfortable. There are rumors that there's a secondary Batsuit and that this is the one we've seen is pretty much destroyed in the first third of the movie. I love the Batmobile. I'm not sure about the Batsuit. I'm not sure how I feel about how seriously he's taking the role. I'm thinking maybe it was just a bad interview during a bad time in his life. It's kind of a rough time for everyone right now, So I could very well see this with the gun being the bat symbol in his chest and him being kind of a weird actor. And if he's not taking it super seriously, I could see it being too edgy and they're touting it as being raw and the craziest Batman ever. I could see it being a little too try-hard, and I could see it kind of flopping and people being like, I want Ben Affleck as the Batman. And if they're not willing to give him another movie, they could be like TV series, or a mini-series, that is, And that would be great, I think people would love the mini-series whether they continue with Pattinson or Affleck either way. I think having both options is great, because even if I hate one of the Batman, and it's entirely possible I could love both of them for very different reasons. The same reason I love peanut butter, and I love chocolate, and I love ice cream, I love all these different things. I don't always love them in the same ways. They're all good for different reasons, They all go well in different scenarios. But I think having the variety is always a nice option. I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of Jared Leto's Joker, but there are some people who are diehard for that incarnation of the character. And you know what? More power to you. It's a fictional character. Have fun. There's nothing against it. But again, it feels a little bit like fan fiction to say that Batfleck would be back past this. However, it could be another incentive to be like, hey, if you're getting in shape for the reshoots of the Justice League, why don't we do a miniseries? We adapt what you were going to do as a movie. We stretch it out a little bit. We make it a miniseries like we did with HBO's Watchmen. And you still get to tell your story. You're not demand to come back. You are not re-entering the cinematic universe. It's just another Elseworld story another what could have been. And if people really love it and you want to come back, we'll make you some more movies. We'll make you some more TV shows. Or you can step away and this will be your swan song of Batman. It could go either way. The more I've talked about it, the more I believe it, and I don't know if that's because I'm good at selling it to myself subconsciously, or if it's just my own, I really want it to be a real thing. But it is a weird time. This is a new scenario to be in, and people are pushing for like David Ayer's cut of the Suicide Squad, where entire character arcs were different, where the ending is different, where it's connected to where Suicide Squad connects to Darkseid, where it connects to all these other things going on in the DC universe. And I think for better or for worse, it would be cool to see that. And I could imagine that being a little bit more costly to finish out. I think with studio intervention by that point, I think what he wanted wasn't fully shot. But then again, they said they had like an entire movie's worth of Jared Leto being a lunatic. So for all I know, they really do have it. However, again, I say if you're not willing to make a movie, potentially go the limited series route that they're probably going to go with for the Snyder Cut. And if you don't want to spend that much money, give them a good comic book artist, turn it into a graphic novel. People will eat that up. I'll eat it up just because I want to know. I'm a curious fella, and there are more people like that in the world. So, that's sort of for you to digest yourself. I mean, we're all going to have different opinions. These are fictional characters, so at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. I mean, these are people being paid to put on costumes and convince us that fake things happened. It's not the most important part of our lives. But, hey, if you enjoy it, that's great. And if you want it, there's a rumor of it happening. And I am a huge fan of Joe Manganiello's acting career in general, so I, of course, have wanted him to step back into the role of Deathstroke for more than, 30 seconds. And actually, a previous podcast episode we did back when we were called Off Topic, I did an entire thing about how I would pitch the Joe Manganiello Deathstroke as the main character movie. There was a very visceral sort of John Wick style, lower budget, highly stylized action movie, rated R, that could be very cool. Of course, there'd be, comparisons to Deadpool and Deathstroke, both being similarly named people with similar named titles, who are both mercenaries. They're very different. Deadpool is a ripoff of the character, but they're so divergent it doesn't really matter. And honestly, every now and then you just need a good mindless action movie, It's a good time to have. Anyway, I'll leave that with you to sort of digest. But now we hit the back half of the topic. I'm going to hit you with one more thing. Whether you read the graphic novel, you saw the Zack Snyder movie, or you saw the HBO miniseries Watchmen, brought up an interesting topic about how a world at the edge of going at each other's throats, people are mad about this, that, and the other. There's a great divide. And what does the smartest man on the planet do? He creates the threat of an alien invasion to make the entire world band together. Now, of course, in the film adaptation, they frame Dr. Manhattan, but in the graphic novel, it's the threat of an interdimensional, absurd, psychic giant octopus monster, which Alan Moore is a mentally unstable being himself, so he tried to make it seem like it was some intelligent way of being like, because comic books are goofy. I don't know if that's true. However, I think the Watchmen miniseries handled it really well and made it almost feel really normal. That being said, it could just be because it's set in Tulsa and the character of Looking Glass feels like he could be from Tulsa, probably because A, the actor playing him is phenomenal, and B, that actor is from Tulsa. But it really genuinely did feel like you were watching Tulsa in an alternate reality as someone who is living in Tulsa currently. It was pretty wild. But I think it's kind of interesting, the idea that the only way to unite everyone who seems to think that we should be making tribes against one another based on how people vote, or what they like to watch, or what they think, or what they look like, based on hobbies, what have you. It goes all the way down to whether or not you like, what era of the same movie franchise you like, or what console you're playing on. It's ridiculous. People look for tribes because they want to be part of something, but being part of something also innately means that you are not part of something else, and it's easy to see them as the enemy when their ideas are not the same as your own. So what does Ozymandias do? Creates a threat that all of mankind must band together to stand up against, to maintain world peace. And I think in a time where the stress of a lockdown is getting to people, where things are kind of dark and difficult to deal with, that it isn't beyond the realm of reality that we are turning to science fiction and video games and the escapism the same way that people did during the Great Depression, of film and books taking off in a big way. People just wanted to be in a different world. It feels like we could use movies about an outside threat to help remind us that we do all work together. Because if you think about it, if some dude cuts you off in traffic, which is a big no-no for me, and they bother the heck out of you, you could be boiling over. You could have had the worst day of your life, and you were ready to just take their skin off with an apple peeler. You were enraged. And if you had the opportunity, you might even worry how far you'd go through with it. But all of a sudden, an alien named Gazorpadorp shows up, and he's like, I'm going to eat your face, blah. You're going to work together with the guy you hate, because deep down, I think we all know that we're all humans. Again, people like you wear Nikes, I wear Nikes, we're friends. You play Ultimate Frisbee, I'm annoying too. Things like that. And you kind of form communities because we all crave that connection. It's part of the hierarchy of needs. We want community. We crave connection. But people also seem to think that when you crave that connection, you should disagree with people. If someone votes a different way, or if they have a different opinion of a controversial figure, you have to hate one another because they're the enemy. And they're not the enemy. They just have a different view on the world. Everyone, more than likely, wants to have a better version of tomorrow, whether it's for themselves or for the whole world. We just don't always agree on what that perfect version of, or better version of tomorrow is, and we usually don't agree on how we're supposed to get there. However, I think science fiction is there to comfort us, comic books as well. The superhero genre is littered with it, but science fiction, I think, is really the first genre that handled it. We are reminded that we should work together, and that we are effective when we work together whenever we have a common enemy. And right now, you'd think our common enemy would be a virus, and us all working together to get around that. But a virus doesn't have a face, so the face becomes our perceived ineptitude of one group or another when we don't know everything that's going on. Or the news is painting their bias all over different figures, both politically and in Hollywood and what have you. And all it's really doing is getting people flustered because they're rushing to the aid to defend the people that they care about, because they now have a stake in their personality and in their moral code, and other people raging against them and ready to crucify them because they didn't do what they wanted. People are frustrated, people are scared, people are stressed. But people are also people. We're all the same species, whether we look the same or not. And I think it's easy to lose sight of that. I mean, science fiction is just a really easy way to paint an enemy against humanity and watch humanity come together, whether it's Independence Day, whether you're talking about the Terminator franchise, whether you're talking about the day the Earth stood still. All these different ideas, it's the world suddenly faced with the threat of something different and realizing that our differences aren't nearly as wide and scary as, a giant squid from outer space or another dimension, or someone who threatens us all harm as a people, because to the outside world, we're the same species. We're all the same. We may eat different foods, we may drive different cars, we may have different beliefs, but we're the same. We're not all that different. So, just as a final thought to leave you with during all this craziness, remember that that person that pissed you off is human, and there's a lot of stuff going on. And I know that when I screw up, it's easy to be like, well, I was just mad because I've had a bad day, because my back hurt, and I stubbed my toe, and I have to go do this, and now this is going to cost me more money. And you have all these excuses for yourself when you screw up, but then you see someone else for a moment, and you interact with them, and you think, wow, what a dick. Maybe not. Maybe they're having a bad day too. They just don't have a chance to give you their whole explanation of why they're so stressed or sleep deprived or worried and why it made them act that way. Some people just suck. It's just a fact of life, but by and large, not everyone does. And I know it's easy to forget that. So during these weird times, just remember that your neighbors around you, they may bother you, but if everyone looks out for everyone, then everyone will be okay. And I know that this isn't a perfect world and that's not going to happen, but if just a few people start giving each other a little bit more slack and believing in one another, you might notice a difference. So, I leave you with that. This has been the Poppycock Podcast. If you had fun with this, keep on listening. We've got a sort of audio drama adaptation of a short story that I cooked up a few months back coming up real soon. I finally got some more stuff so we can start recording it. It'll be great. I'm recording the sound design for it, footsteps, doors opening, all that stuff. So all of I never remember if it's Foley or Foley, but the sound effects that go behind things you don't think about. I'll be doing that, recording it myself. I'm doing a majority of the voices. I've got some of my friends coming in, voicing some characters. It's going to be very interesting, very different experience. And if it's good, you can enjoy it, and if it's bad, you can make fun of it. But either way, you've got a little something to kill some time, and I think we all have a little bit more time on our hands than we'd planned this summer. So, appreciate you tuning in. If you enjoyed it, awesome. If you didn't, thanks for hearing me out anyway, or maybe your phone is broken and you couldn't pause the podcast. Either way, you suffered through it, and I appreciate you. Hearing someone out is a sign of maturity, so good on you, pal. Have a great day. This has been the Poppycock Podcast.